The buzzing atmosphere of the Vidian Academy was charged with excitement as the new school year commenced on the distant planet of Vol. The students, a diverse mix of alien species, had gathered in the Grand Hall for the traditional introduction of new students. Among the crowd, a young girl with shimmering silver skin and luminescent eyes stood out. Her name was Zura, a Voron, known for their advanced telepathic abilities and elegant, almost ethereal appearance. She was one of the brightest students in her class, with a reputation for her sharp wit and relentless curiosity. As the principal introduced the new students, Zura's attention was suddenly captured by an unusual figure standing awkwardly at the edge of the stage. He was taller than the others, with a slightly hunched posture and pale, almost translucent skin. His name was Ethan, and he was the first human ever to attend Vidian Academy. Zura's initial reaction was one of disdain. Humans, she had heard, were primitive and overly emotional creatures. They lacked the advanced cognitive abilities that her species and others in the galaxy possessed. As the other students whispered and pointed at the new arrival, Zura couldn't help but join in, her telepathic voice echoing in the minds of her friends, mocking the humans' strange appearance and limited intellect. Ethan, however, was oblivious to the telepathic chatter around him. He was more concerned with trying to navigate the unfamiliar surroundings and blend in with the crowd. But blending in was not an option. His every move was scrutinized, every mistake amplified by the telepathic whispers that followed him. As the days passed, Zura and her friends continued to mock Ethan, finding amusement in his struggles to adapt to the advanced technology and customs of Volta. Zura, in particular, took great pleasure in telepathically broadcasting his blunders to the entire class. But Ethan, despite the constant ridicule, never retaliated. He simply continued to study, work hard, and try to fit in. One day, during a particularly challenging class on interstellar physics, the students were given a complex problem to solve. Zura, confident in her abilities, quickly completed the task and waited impatiently for the others to catch up. She glanced at Ethan, expecting to see him struggling as usual. To her surprise, he was deep in thought, his brow furrowed in concentration. Minutes later, Ethan raised his hand hesitantly, asking the instructor if he could present his solution. The class fell silent. Zura watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism as Ethan approached the board. As he explained his solution, Zura's amusement turned to shock. Not only was his answer correct, but it also revealed a depth of understanding that she had not expected. After class, Zura found herself pondering the human's unexpected display of intelligence. It didn't make sense. How could a being from a supposedly primitive planet possess such knowledge? Her curiosity was piqued, but her pride wouldn't allow her to admit it. As the days went on, Zura began observing Ethan more closely. She noticed that he often spent long hours in the library, poring over ancient texts and advanced scientific journals. His determination and resilience were undeniable, and slowly, Zura's perception of him began to shift. One afternoon, Zura decided to approach Ethan, her curiosity finally overcoming her pride. She found him in the library, surrounded by stacks of books, his face buried in a complex manual on quantum mechanics. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, her telepathic voice softening, "I've noticed that you're quite adept at solving problems. How did you manage to understand the principles of interstellar physics so quickly?" Ethan looked up, surprised by the unexpected question. He smiled slightly, a gesture that seemed both foreign and endearing to Zura. "It's not about understanding everything at once," he replied, his voice calm and measured. "It's about persistence, about breaking down complex ideas into simpler parts, and learning from every mistake." Zura was taken aback by his humility and the wisdom in his words. For the first time, she saw Ethan not as an inferior being, but as someone with a unique perspective and valuable insights. A strange feeling stirred within her, a mixture of respect and curiosity. As they continued to talk, Zura realized that there was much more to Ethan than she had ever imagined. His knowledge, though different from hers, was profound in its own way, and for the first time, Zura felt a genuine connection with the human that went beyond mere curiosity. As the bell rang, signaling the end of their conversation, Zura found herself smiling at Ethan, not out of mockery, but out of genuine interest. Perhaps, she thought, there is more to this human than meets the eye. Little did she know, this newfound connection would soon lead them both on an adventure that would challenge everything they thought they knew about each other and the universe itself. The next few days passed in a blur for Zura. Her conversations with Ethan became more frequent, and with each passing day, she found herself more intrigued by the human. They would often meet in the library after classes, where Ethan would explain concepts from his world while Zura shared her knowledge of Voron science and history. Their mutual curiosity bridged the gap between their cultures, and a tentative friendship began to blossom. However, not everyone was pleased with this newfound alliance. Among the students, whispers of Zura's betrayal grew louder. Her friends, once close allies, began to distance themselves, questioning her loyalty to her own species. Zura, once the epitome of Voron pride, now found herself caught between two worlds, one that she had always known, and one that was just beginning to unfold before her. One afternoon, as they were discussing the peculiarities of Earth's gravitational anomalies, Ethan suddenly grew quiet. His usual enthusiasm seemed dampened, and Zura noticed a shadow pass over his face. "Is something bothering you, Ethan?" she asked, her telepathic voice filled with concern. Ethan hesitated, his eyes betraying a deep inner turmoil. "There's something I haven't told you, Zura," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something about why I'm here, and it's not just to study." Zura's curiosity was piqued, but she could sense the weight of whatever burden Ethan was carrying. She remained silent, allowing him the space to continue. "My coming to Voltor wasn't just a coincidence," Ethan began, his voice trembling slightly. "I was sent here on a mission by the United Earth Alliance. There's been talk of a new technology developed by the Vorons, a device that can manipulate the very fabric of Earth's leaders are afraid that if it falls into the wrong hands, it could lead to unimaginable consequences. Or even war." Zura's eyes widened in shock. The idea of such a powerful device was both fascinating and terrifying. She had heard rumors of secret projects within the Voron government, but she had never imagined they could be so dangerous. "So you're here to steal this technology?" Zura asked, her voice filled with disbelief and anger. "No," Ethan replied quickly, shaking his head. "I'm here to learn to understand it, and to find a way to ensure it's used for the benefit of all, not just for power or control. I didn't come here to be a spy, Zura. I came here because I believe that humans and Vorons can work together, that we can find common ground. But I couldn't do it alone. I need your help." Zura was silent, her mind racing with the implications of Ethan's confession. She felt a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, fear, but also a deep sense of responsibility. She had always prided herself on her intellectual prowess, on her ability to see the bigger picture, and now she was being asked to see beyond the immediate, beyond the petty rivalries and prejudices of her peers. After what felt like an eternity, Zura finally spoke. "If what you're saying is true, then we're all in danger. The Vorons, the humans, everyone. We need to find out more about this device and who's behind it." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Zura. I knew I could count on you." As they made their way back to the academy, Zura couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and she knew that their journey would test the limits of their trust and friendship. But deep down, she also felt a spark of hope, a hope that together they could prevent a catastrophe and forge a new alliance between their worlds. That night, as Zura lay in bed, her mind replayed the day's events. She had always been taught that Vorons were superior, that their way of life was the pinnacle of civilization. But now, she was beginning to see the cracks in that belief. The more she learned from Ethan, the more she realized how much her people still had to learn about humility, about cooperation, and about the true meaning of strength. As she drifted off to sleep, Zura made a silent vow. She would do whatever it took to uncover the truth, even if it meant challenging everything she had ever known. The following morning, Zura and Ethan began their investigation into the rumored spacetime device. Their first stop was the Academy's restricted archives, a place few students dared to enter. Zura, being one of the top students, had access to these archives, but she had never felt the need to explore them until now. As they walked through the dimly lit corridors of the archive, the air was thick with dust and the weight of forgotten knowledge. Ancient scrolls and digital records lined the walls, chronicling the long and storied history of Zura led the way, her mind focused on finding any reference to the mysterious device Ethan had mentioned. Hours passed as they sifted through records, scanning ancient texts and deciphering cryptic codes. It was exhausting work, but neither of them was willing to give up. Finally, just as Zura was beginning to lose hope, she stumbled upon a file that caught her attention. "Ethan!" Look at this, she called, her voice echoing through the empty room. Ethan hurried over, peering over her shoulder at the screen. The file was encrypted, but Zura's quick mind had already begun to decode it. As the file opened, a holographic image appeared before them, a blueprint of a device unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a complex network of circuits and energy conduits designed to harness and manipulate the very fabric of reality. The accompanying text detailed the theoretical principles behind the device, describing its potential to create wormholes, alter gravitational fields, and even shift objects through time. "This is it," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with awe. "This is what I was sent here to find." Zura's mind raced as she studied the blueprint. The technology was far beyond anything she had ever encountered, even in her advanced studies. But as she delved deeper into the text, a sense of unease began to grow within her. "This is dangerous," Zura said, her voice trembling. "If this device were to be activated, it could destabilize the entire planet, maybe even the galaxy." Ethan nodded solemnly. "That's why we need to find out who's behind this and stop them before it's too late." But as they continued to study the file, Zura noticed something that made her blood run cold. A signature, hidden within the encryption, revealing the identity of the project's creator. "It can't be!" Zura gasped, her hands shaking as she pointed to the name. This project was initiated by the High Council, the very leaders of Volta. Ethan's face paled as the gravity of their discovery sank in. "The High Council. They're the ones behind this." Zura nodded, her mind reeling with shock and betrayal. The High Council had always been revered as the wisest and most just rulers in the galaxy. For them to be involved in something so dangerous, so reckless, was unthinkable. "We can't confront them directly," Ethan said, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to gather more evidence. Find out who within the council is pushing for this, and why. If we go public too soon, we could be silenced before we have a chance to stop them." Zura agreed, though the thought of keeping such a monumental secret filled her with dread. But she knew he was right. If they were going to prevent a catastrophe, they had to proceed carefully. As they left the archives, Zura felt the weight of their discovery pressing down on her. The High Council, the very foundation of Voron society, was now suspect. The world she had known all her life was crumbling around her, and she was beginning to realize that the truth was far more complex and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Over the next few days, Zura and Ethan worked tirelessly to uncover more information. They hacked into secure databases, intercepted encrypted communications, and pieced together a web of intrigue that stretched across the galaxy. It became clear that the project was part of a larger plan, a plan to consolidate power and control over the galaxy's resources, using the device as a weapon of unimaginable force. But as they dug deeper, they also uncovered evidence of a growing resistance within the council, members who opposed the project and were working in secret to dismantle it. Zura's hope began to grow. But so did the danger. The more they uncovered, the more they realized how precarious their situation was. They were playing a dangerous game, and one wrong move could cost them everything. As they prepared to take their next step, Zura couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She knew that their every move was being monitored, that their enemies were closing in. But she also knew that they couldn't turn back now. The fate of not just Voltor, but the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. One evening, as they were going over the latest intel in a secluded part of the academy, Zura noticed something unsettling. A familiar presence lurking in the background of her thoughts. A shadow in the otherwise clear mental landscape she had cultivated. "Ethan," she said quietly, her telepathic voice barely a whisper. "I think we've been compromised. Someone is following us." Ethan's eyes darted around the room, his hand instinctively reaching for the small device he carried, a personal cloaking field generator that he had managed to smuggle from Earth. "We need to be careful," he replied, his voice tinged with urgency. "If they know we're on to them, they won't hesitate to take us out." They decided to split up, agreeing to meet later at a hidden location deep within the Academy's labyrinthine underbelly. As Zura made her way through the darkened corridors, her mind was racing with possibilities. Who could have betrayed them, and why? When she arrived at the rendezvous point, Ethan was already there, looking more anxious than she had ever seen him. "Zura, we have a problem," he said, his voice shaking. "I've just intercepted a message from the Council's inner circle. They know everything About the device, about us. They're planning to arrest us tomorrow. Zura's heart sank. The walls were closing in, and she knew they had little time left. We need to leave now, she said, her voice firm. We can't stay here. We need to find the resistance within the council, and warn them. But as they prepared to make their escape, a sudden noise echoed through the chamber, a faint, metallic clink that sent chills down Zura's spine. She turned, and there, standing in the shadows, was one of her closest friends, Kira, a fellow Voron, with whom she had shared countless memories. Kira, Zura gasped, her voice a mix of relief and confusion. What are you doing here? But Kira's expression was cold, devoid of the warmth Zura had always known. I could ask you the same thing, Zura, she said, her voice laced with bitterness. What are you doing with this human? Plotting against our own people. Zura's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. Kira had been the one watching them, the one who had betrayed them to the council. Kira, you don't understand, Zura pleaded. The council is planning something terrible. They're going to use the device to control the entire galaxy. We have to stop them. But Kira shook her head, her eyes narrowing with anger. No, Zura. You've been corrupted by this human. The council is doing what's necessary to protect our world, to ensure our survival. You've betrayed your own people? And for what? Some misguided sense of morality. Zura felt a surge of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal. Kira, her closest friend, had turned against her, blinded by loyalty to a corrupt regime. I'm sorry, Kira Zura said, her voice trembling. But I can't let them do this. I won't stand by and watch as they destroy everything. Kira's expression hardened, and she raised her hand, a pulse of energy forming in her palm. A Voron weapon designed to incapacitate its target with a single blast. Then, I'm afraid I have no choice, Kira said, her voice cold. I have to stop you. Time seemed too slow as Zura and Kira stared each other down, both knowing that only one of them would leave this room unscathed. Ethan, sensing the danger, moved to intervene, but Zura held up her hand, stopping him. This is between us, she said, her voice steady. Kira, please, don't do this. But Kira's resolve was unwavering. With a swift motion, she released the energy pulse, sending it hurtling toward Zura. In that split second, Zura's training took over. She reacted instinctively, raising a telekinetic shield just in time to deflect the blast. The force of the impact sent her crashing into the wall, but she quickly regained her footing, her mind sharp and focused. She knew she couldn't let this end in violence. But Kira was relentless, her attacks growing more ferocious with each passing moment. Zura dodged and deflected as best she could, but she could feel her strength waning. Kira was a formidable opponent, and Zura knew that if she didn't do something soon, she would lose. In a desperate bid to end the fight, Zura reached out, with her mind connecting with Kira's thoughts in a way she had never done before. She delved deep into her friend's consciousness, searching for the spark of goodness she knew still existed. Kira, listen to me, Zura said, her voice echoing in Kira's mind. This isn't who you are. You're not a killer. You're my friend. Please don't let the council turn you into something you're not. For a moment, Zura felt a flicker of hesitation in Kira's mind, a crack in the wall of anger and loyalty that had been built up over time. But before she could break through, Kira's mental defenses slammed shut, and the connection was severed. With a final, powerful blast, Kira sent Zura sprawling across the floor, the air knocked out of her lungs. As Zura struggled to get up, she saw Kira standing over her, the weapon in her hand glowing with deadly energy. I'm sorry, Zura, Kira said, her voice cold and distant. But this is the only way. But before Kira could deliver the final blow, Ethan leaped forward, activating his cloaking device and tackling Kira to the ground. The two struggled briefly, but Ethan's agility and surprise attack gave him the upper hand. He managed to disarm Kira and pin her down, his face twisted in a mix of anger and regret. Kira, don't make me do this, Ethan said, his voice pleading. You don't have to be their pawn. We can find another way. But Kira's eyes were filled with hatred as she glared up at Ethan. You'll never understand. Human, she spat. You're nothing but a parasite, a threat to our world. You and Zura are both traitors. and you'll pay for your betrayal." Before Ethan could respond, Kira activated a hidden device on her wrist, sending out a distress signal that would alert the Council's forces to their location. Ethan cursed under his breath, realizing that they were out of time. "We have to go now," he said, pulling Zura to her feet. "The Council's enforcers will be here any minute." Zura, still reeling from the fight, nodded weakly. She cast one last sorrowful glance at Kira, who lay on the ground, her eyes filled with anger and betrayal. "I'm sorry," Zura whispered, her heart heavy with guilt. "I wish it didn't have to be this way." With that, Zura and Ethan fled the room, their hearts pounding as they raced through the Academy's corridors. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the distance, a grim reminder of the danger that pursued them. As they ran, Zura couldn't shake the image of Kira's cold, unforgiving gaze from her mind. She had lost a friend, perhaps forever, and the weight of that loss pressed down on her like a suffocating shroud. But there was no time to dwell on it now. They had to escape, regroup, and continue their mission. The future of both Voltaire and Earth depended on it. The days that followed were a blur of constant movement, evasion, and planning. Zura and Ethan had managed to escape the Academy, but they knew they were far from safe. The Council's forces were relentless, hunting them across their faces plastered on every wanted poster, their names cursed in every corner of the galaxy. They had made contact with the Resistance, a small but determined group of Vorans and other alien species who had seen through the Council's lies and were fighting to stop the construction of the spacetime device. Zura and Ethan were welcomed into their ranks, their knowledge and skills invaluable to the cause. But the Resistance was outnumbered and outgunned, and time was running out. The device was nearly complete. The Council was preparing to activate it. And if they succeeded, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift irrevocably, plunging countless worlds into chaos and tyranny. The Resistance's leader, a seasoned warrior named Rosen, called for a final, desperate assault on the facility where the device was being held. It was a suicide mission, but it was their only chance to stop the Council before it was too late. As they prepared for the attack, Zura couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision she had made. She had chosen to fight against her own people, to risk everything for the sake of a higher ideal. The cost had been high. She had lost friends, betrayed her own kind, and put herself in the crosshairs of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But as she stood among the Resistance fighters, she knew she had made the right choice. This was bigger than Earth. It was about justice, about freedom, about the future of the galaxy itself. The day of the attack arrived. The Resistance moved swiftly and silently under the cover of darkness. Zura and Ethan led a small team through the underground tunnels that led to the facility, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. As they emerged into the heart of the facility, they were met with a sight that took their breath away. The device, a towering structure of gleaming metal and pulsating energy, stood at the center of the chamber. Its power radiated through the air like a palpable force. But there was no time to marvel at the sight. The Council's forces were already there, guarding the device with an army of heavily armed soldiers. The Resistance fighters knew they were outmatched, but they had no choice. They had come this far, and they would see this through to the end. The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. Energy blasts and explosions filled the air, the sound of clashing weapons echoing through the chamber. Zura fought with all her strength, her telekinetic abilities honed to perfection. Her mind focused on one goal, stopping the device at all costs. Ethan, too, fought with everything he had, using his earthborn ingenuity and resourcefulness to outmaneuver and outwit the enemy. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, cutting a path through the chaos as they made their way to the device's control center. But as they approached the controls, they were confronted by a figure who sent a chill down Zura's spine. Counselor Varax, the mastermind behind the project, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Fools," Varax sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can stop us? The device is already active. In moments, it will reshape the galaxy as we see fit, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." Zura and Ethan exchanged a glance, knowing that this was their last chance. With a nod, they charged at Varax, their minds and bodies working in perfect harmony as they fought to reach the controls. But Varax was no ordinary opponent. He wielded the power of the device itself, bending space and time to his will. making every step they took a struggle against impossible odds. Zura's telepathic abilities were pushed to their limits as she fought to break through Varax's defenses, but he was too strong, too entrenched in his power. Ethan, too, was struggling, his every move countered by Varax's overwhelming force. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Zura felt a surge of energy within her, a power she had never felt before. It was as if the very fabric of reality was responding to her will, bending and twisting at her command. With a final, desperate effort, Zura unleashed this power, breaking through Varax's defenses and sending him crashing to the ground. But the victory was short-lived. Varax activated a failsafe on the device, sending it into overdrive. Its power spiraled out of control, its energy building to a critical mass. "Zura, we have to get out of here," Ethan shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "It's going to blow." But Zura knew what had to be done. The device couldn't be stopped, but it could be contained. With a calmness that belied the chaos around her, she reached out with her mind, wrapping the device in a telekinetic field, holding its power in check. "Go, Ethan," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "I'll hold it as long as I can. You need to get out of here." Ethan's eyes widened in horror as he realized what Zura was planning. "No, Zura, you can't." But Zura cut him off, her voice firm. "There's no other way. Go. Now." Before it's too late, tears filled Ethan's eyes as he looked at her, knowing that this was the last time he would see her. "I'm sorry, Zura," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry." Zura gave him a sad smile, her heart breaking at the sight of his pain. "It's okay, Ethan. We did what we had to do. Now go. Save yourself." With a final tearful glance, Ethan turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness as the chamber began to shake and tremble. Zura focused all her energy on containing the device, her mind straining against the unimaginable force within. She could feel her strength waning, her body growing weaker with each passing second. But she held on, knowing that this was the only way to save the galaxy from the Council's tyranny. And as the device reached its critical point, she closed her eyes, embracing the inevitable with a sense of peace. In that final moment, Zura's mind was filled with images of her home, of the friends she had lost, and of the future she had fought so hard to protect. And as the device exploded in a blinding flash of light, she knew that she had done the right thing. The explosion ripped through the chamber, vaporizing everything in its path. But Zura's telekinetic field held containing the blast long enough for the energy to dissipate harmlessly into the void. When the light finally faded, the chamber was empty. The device and its terrible power had been reduced to nothing but ash and memories. Shura was gone. Her sacrifice had saved countless lives and ensured that the galaxy would be free from the Council's tyranny. But her memory lived on, a symbol of hope and courage in the face of impossible odds. And as the survivors of the resistance gathered to mourn their fallen comrade, they knew that Zura's legacy would endure, inspiring future generations to fight for what was right, no matter the cost.